Good evening.
Kavod Harav, how are you?
Baruch Hashem.
Baruch Hashem.
Good evening.
You too. Okay. Here we go. Here we are. Yeah, so this chapter we finished. Going to Samech Bet 62. Yeah, so it says in the tour, even though you have to be careful regarding the letters, the diction. But let's say he wasn't so careful. You know, he didn't do 100% everything that we mentioned, all those things. Right? Anyway, he fulfills obligation. So in other words, he read it like, normal, and he didn't do all the special things that we mentioned. Read it like a normal guy, average, whatever. Still, he fulfills his obligation. Because after all, he read it. He read it. But it says, in any case, but it says you should try to be anyway as precise as possible, if possible. Because this rabbi said, Shema right? Whoever reads Kriyat Shema with the proper diction, right? So they cool off the geinam for him. So that means he's saved from all this affliction, whatever. It's a big thing. When he kept b'chol lashon, another thing he says is that Shema can be read in any language. The Darshina and Shema b'chol lashon that we extrapolate that you can read in any language. B'chol lashon shata shomea, any language you understand. The point is, you should understand what you're saying. Katav Rambam Zal hakoreh b'chol lashon tzarich lizaher. But it says Rambam, if you're reading it in some other language, so then you got to be careful. Divrei shibush shebeoto lashon. Be careful not to mess up that language. In other words, make sure the language that you're reading it in, that it's grammatically correct, and so forth and so on. You don't want to have a messed up reading also in a different language as well. So it says you should be careful in that language, just like you are with Hebrew, make sure you get the proper grammar, the proper diction, proper pronunciation.
But if you have an accent in all languages, then what happens?
Well, yeah, I understand you. I mean, no, we do the best we can,
It is there.
Yeah, we
Doesn't
do
go.
the best we can. There are people who are good at languages, that means that they can pick up the sounds very easily. They have a good hearing, they have a good ear. So they pick it up, and they can do it really good. Some people have a hard time with languages, Usually, like Americans, have a hard time with Hebrew. So for them, it takes like years, to pick up the Hebrew. It's like, it's like there are people who live in Israel, Americans, like 30 years, they still don't know Hebrew. I won't mention any names, but unfortunately, that's the way it is. So we do the best we can. I remember I've met a lot of people here, in America, also from my community, the Georgian community, and a lot of them, never really succeeded in English very well. They're very sloppy. They're very, accent is very poor. But some of them, did a good job. You know what I mean? So, you can see that they worked on it, or they're talented at it. So,
They're more left hemisphere of the brain.
Oh, okay. Yes, I understand.
Yeah.
I understand, yes. So, yeah, a person should work on it, as much as he can. As we said, right, that this rabbi, he worked 3 years, to get the proper pronunciation. He brought this rabbi from Turkey, right? And he taught him how to pronounce everything properly. Because they don't know in Hungary, what do they know about the Hebrew? They know nothing about that. All they know is goulash. They eat goulash over there. What do they know? They don't know about Hebrew. So he brought somebody who knows how to do it, and he learned. So it's like, he learned from him 3 years. It's like getting a bachelor's degree. It's like it's a lot of work. It's like So it's for some people, it could be a lifetime of work. But the point is, do the best you can. Okay, so so let's see the Bet Yosef here. Let's see how he explains this. So it says over here, where is the source of this? Perek Haya Koreh. It's over there in the Gemara. Chet Vav Amud Aleph. Plukta de Rabbi Yehuda ve Rabbi Yosef. It's a machloket there between Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Yosef. The Ifsika Ilchata beGemara. So the Gemara paskins Kiman de Mekil, like the one who's lenient. So what does that mean? We're lenient, and we say, even though you didn't do all those details that we mentioned, you still fulfilled your obligation. That's number one. Then he goes on, De'amar Rav Chama bar Chanina, Kol HaKoreh Kriyat Shema be'otiotea, Katav Rabbeinu HaGadol Maria Avuhav. This rabbi writes, Zal, Ulai hatam shemetzanenin lo geinam sheme'achar shehu me'orer atzmo beze. So he says, what's the reason why they cool down geinam for him? Because he's careful about this. Because umania chom tiv'i ledakdek be'otiotea. So he says that בשכר זה, החום הטבעי מצננים לו חום אחר שהוא בגיהנום. So he says, since he makes such a great effort to go out of his way to read everything the proper way, which is hard, a lot of details involved, as we already mentioned. And so, as a reward for that, he says that they cool down the heat of the Gehinnom. So what he means to say here is like, since he goes against his nature, to read in a certain way, even though it's not his nature to read that way, so they do him the favor of cooling it down. I mean, in other words, they do something which is also against the nature, because he did something against the nature, against his nature. So the rule is like this, when you break your nature, they also break it for you. They give you a reward like that. Okay, let's see about Yosef. I'm sorry, let's see Shulchan Aruch here. So says Shulchan Aruch, even though it's a mitzvah to do all those right precision reading issues that we mentioned, if he wasn't careful about these things, he still fulfills obligation. So lechatchila, he should try to do it. If not, okay. So as long as he read it correctly, in other words, he didn't read it in a way which is totally mistaken. Like you can't even understand what he's talking about. That's already something else. We're not talking about that, right? But he just read it normal, it wasn't very careful. So, last night, we called, after I told you guys about this Chazan, Moshe Chabusha. So, Bruria texted me, she said, oh, I looked on YouTube and it sounds very nice. So when she told me that, I also looked, and I checked it out, to see how he says Kriyat Shema. They have that. They have everything. They have the whole year-long prayers from him. Also, they have Tehillim, by the way. There's Tehillim from him. I think the whole book of Tehillim you can find. Interesting. So, and also the High Holy Day prayers, the Slichot, everything, It's incredible. By the way, also you can find the reading of any parsha, that you want to read, that you want to hear the parsha, how they read it. It's all there. Everything is there. But anyway, what I heard was that we were on the right track yesterday. All the things that we said, were very accurate. So, in fact, I think the way we described it yesterday is even more accurate than the way he does it. So, so not bad, right? The truth is that there's different versions of that from different times, different occasions, all the kinds of things. So the one that I listened to yesterday was very simple, very just straightforward, no fancy stuff. But still, very nice and clean. So everything I told you yesterday was corroborated. Baruch Hashem, everything was good. Anyway, let's go on a little bit. Unfortunately, most people don't know these halachot. You know what I mean? They never learn these halachot. So how they read? They read like everybody. They read like normal. Like they know how to read. They're not careful about these little details. Who knows about these things? One out of 10,000 people knows about this. Okay, so then it goes on. As we said, right? You can read it in any language you want. So says Bet Yosef. Over there, it's in Gemara, Yud Gimel Amud Aleph. Tanu Rabbanan, Kriyat Shema kiktava divrei Rabbi. Chachamim omrim bechol lashon. So the first opinion, Rabbi says, you have to read it like it's written, but the Chachamim say it can be read in any language. Perek Elu Nemarim, and this perek called Lamed Bet Amud Bet, Satam Lan Tanak Chachamim. So over there they pass like the Chachamim, right? So the halakha is like the Chachamim. So what does that mean? A person can read it in any language. As we said, right, that if you know how to read in Hebrew, you shouldn't read it in a different language. We're gonna probably get to that, but we're talking about somebody who doesn't know Hebrew, so then he can read it in English, if he understands English. He can read it in English, whatever language he understands. But the thing with Hebrew is, even though you don't understand it, it's still, better than the other languages. That's the advantage of Hebrew. But at least, you should know, like, generally what it's talking about, at least, right? Whatever. At least the first verse. So, yeah. So it goes on with Yosef. Katava Kobo, B'Shema Rif, right? It says in the name of the Rif, Tehane Mile B'Tzibur. That's only with the community. But it says when it comes to individuals, no. Kedama Rabbi Yochanan, like Rabbi Yochanan says in Shabbat, Yud Bet Amud Bet, Al Ish'al, a person should not ask Adam Tzerachav B'Lashon Arami. Oh, so it says over there that a person shouldn't make requests from Hashem in Aramaic. You ever hear about this before? Not a good idea to pray in Aramaic. Why is that? Because I say the Chazal, the angels don't understand it, so they can't take it up to Hashem. They don't know what you're talking about. For them, it's like Chinese, like they don't know what you're saying. So therefore, that's why we don't do requests, individual requests in Aramaic. But when we're with a minyan, so then we do it. Why? Because when there's a minyan, the Shekhinah is there, the divine presence is there. So Hashem, what do you call it? Hashem, hears you because of the Shekhinah is there, the 10 people.
I have a question.
Sure.
So remember how it said that Paro knew all 70 languages or whatever, but he never learned Hebrew?
Yes.
Did he know Aramaic?
They all knew. That was like the major language in that time.
Okay. But it's similar though.
That was like the English of that time,
But isn't it similar to Hebrew?
It is, but if you don't really know both of them, you won't be able to figure it out.
Okay.
There's a story like this brought down that there was a certain king, it's brought down somewhere, maybe in the Talmud or somewhere. I don't recall right now, but it's a true story. There was a certain king. I think it was a Greek king, Greek, and he wanted to know what's written in the Torah. He wanted to read it. He wanted to, whatever. So what he did was he didn't have a translation. King James. He didn't have King James, right? It was too early for that. The Greeks came before the British, right? So what happened was that he commissioned a certain, a group of people to study, Hebrew, and then, to teach him what's written there. So he, this committee, right, after studying a couple of years later, they came back to him and they said, you honor the king, says we weren't able to figure it out, what it says there. So they're not talking about the Chumash, right? They're talking about the Talmud, you know what I mean? So the king asked him, they said, why? You learned Hebrew, didn't you? Right? You took those lessons online, didn't you? What happened? So what were you lacking? So they told him, they said, the problem is, they said, Your Honor, the king, they said, there's a lot of Aramaic over there. We don't understand it. We learned Hebrew, but we didn't learn Aramaic. So he says that's why we can't understand it. The Talmud is mostly Aramaic. You know what I mean? So then he figures it out. He's like, oh, gee, okay, well, so what does he do? He makes another commission, to learn Aramaic and to teach him what's there. So he commissions another commission. After a couple of years, they come back to him and they say, okay, Your Honor the King. He says, no, he says, can you tell me what's written there? So they told him, he says, no, I'm sorry. He says, because the problem is, he says, some of it is Hebrew there, So it says, you told us to learn Aramaic, but we didn't learn Hebrew, so we can't tell you exactly what's written there. True story, So what he did was, he figured it out that he had to commission like two commissions, and put them together, and then they could sit together and figure out what's written there. That's what he did in the end, what I mean? So it took him such a long time, it took him probably like 10 years, to get to the bottom of it. So that's the way it is, that Aramaic and Hebrew are really different languages, even though they are similar. But, it's definitely, the story goes like this, right? If you look in the books, that in the times of the Talmud, most of the common Jews, commoners, they spoke Aramaic, but they didn't speak Hebrew, the Jews. They didn't know Hebrew. And that's why the Talmud was written in Aramaic, because they wanted to make it in a language they could understand. That was the whole thing, In Iraq, in Bavel, that was the language that they spoke. Everybody spoke Aramaic. And that's what that's why they did it like that. So, so they say that the common folk spoke Aramaic because that was a language of the land. But the high class people, the top-notch people, they spoke Hebrew only. They're the only ones who know Hebrew. The ones that were educated, more. I mean, that's high class people. So that's the way it is, But especially with these angels, So why? Because they're like robots. You understand? So if you teach them to understand Hebrew, they will not understand a word of Aramaic because, it's just like it's different. So they can't make that connection. They don't have that, introspection to do that. They're robots, So let's say you speak to a computer, right? A language that doesn't know. It's not going to understand what you're saying. Like you're one letter off in the computer and the computer won't know what you're talking about. So it needs like human judgment, They're talking about that today, right? What they call that? Artificial intelligence, right? AI, whatever is going on. It's hard to make that artificial intelligence because computers are not, they don't have intuition. Whatever, it's a whole thing, it's a whole discussion. They can do that too. They can build that in also, maybe, maybe, I don't know, God knows. Whatever, it's a tough process. But anyway, right, getting back to what we said, so so it says right, so it says I don't know what you're saying. So it says, what are you trying to say that Kriyat Shema tells them has requests from Hashem? You're not requesting anything from Hashem when you're saying Kriyat Shema. So what does it have to do with this? You know what I mean? As we already mentioned several times, right? Kriyat Shema is not a prayer. It's like a declaration, So what does that have to do with requesting anything? You're not requesting anything there. That's what the Beit Yosef, remarks about this. Like, what are you talking about? Like, what does it have to do one with the other? So he says, so he says, therefore, when it comes to Kriyat Shema, we don't differentiate between the individual and then the community. It's all the same. But you can say it in any language because, you don't need the angels to carry it for you because it's not a prayer. Okay, so then it goes on. So that's the way it seems to be. all the poskim say like that. Shelo chilku, they didn't differentiate ben yachid tzibur, between the community and the individual. It's all the same. So then he goes on, Katav Rambam, it says the Rambam, Hakoreh bechol lashon, right? If you're reading in a different language, the Rambam says, remember what we said? That you have to make sure you're doing the proper rules of that language, right? Proper grammar, proper diction, proper pronunciation. You also have to be careful about that. So, you got to get your English down, you know what I mean? Or whatever, your Spanish, whatever it is, right, that you're using. Whatever it is that you're using, you got to have it down. So, yeah. So, let's go on. So he says, so it says Bit Yosef's Pashut, right? It's clear, right? That's clear. Has to be like that. What would make you think that you can say a different language, and use a slang, you can't use slang language for Kriyat Shema, You can't say yo. Yo's they're not gonna understand what you're saying. Okay. So let's go on. Let's see Shulchan Aruch, right? So it says, Yachol likrota bechol lashon. So it says Shulchan Aruch, you can read in any language, right? V'yizaher midivrei shibush shebeoto lashon v'yidakdek bo kimo b'lashon hakodesh. But he says that you have to be careful, right, to say that language properly, right, according to the rules of that language. As we said. Okay, good. Let's go to Gimel. It's a short chapter. We can probably finish it today. So it says another rule that it brings here, but you know what that means? You have to say it loud enough that you can hear what you're saying. It shouldn't be too quiet. So let's read the Torah and see exactly how he says this. Second line, right? So it says like this, but you have to also hear what you're saying. Right? Whatever you're saying out of your mouth. But what about if he didn't? Right? If he said it so quietly that he can't hear himself. Yatsa. So, but he did fulfill his obligation, even though he didn't do it. But at least, right, that what? He has to at least, make sure that he pronounces it with his mouth, not just to read it silently, right? That doesn't work, doesn't count. So you don't have to, say it so loud, whatever. Even b'diavad, okay, if you said it, that you didn't hear it, but at least you pronounced it, at least that much. Like he says over here, right? You have to do it with your lips, you got to move your lips, right? As they say, read my lips, right? But he says if you just reading it by heart, and no, you'll say it doesn't feel obligation like that. Why is that? Because just reading by heart is not considered to be like saying it. It's not the same thing. Let's say so you're not going to fulfill your obligation like that. By the way, there's a whole discussion of, when it comes to this issue, there's a whole discussion also regarding like blessings, Can a person say a blessing without, just by heart? So the truth is that the halacha is we can't do that. But the Rambam holds that you can in certain cases. We don't pass like that. It's an interesting discussion. We're going to get that later on. Sometime down the road. But right. Meanwhile,
you mean that we have to read the text? It's like we have to have the text in front of us. We can't just say.
No, it doesn't mean that. It just means that you have to actually pronounce it with your lips. Read my lips. No new taxes. Okay,
so you can't just like mutter it under your breath or think about it.
Right, exactly. That's what we don't want. Right.
Okay, but like if like before I went into surgery, I asked an anesthesiologist, I said, tell me before I go under. And he said, Okay, yeah, we're getting ready to do that. I'm like, look, tell me before, like, sometimes they have you count backwards or whatever. He wasn't going to do that. I said, but tell me before I go under. And he's like, I'm putting the medicine in now. And so I started saying Shema, but I didn't have a text in front of me.
Oh, yeah, no, you don't need that. It's okay.
All right, so you can
don't need that.
say it by heart. You just have to say it.
Right, absolutely. Absolutely.
Okay, gotcha.
We already discussed that, by the way, before. And the reason is, even though it's, there's a rule like this, right, that the written Torah, you're not supposed to say it by heart. In other words, you should be saying it from a text. But
Right.
it says the Beit Yosef, when it comes to things like this, it's okay. Why? Because everybody knows it by heart. So therefore, right, we're not going to concern you're not going to make a mistake there.
Okay.
That's the reason why we're not particular about that.
So Hashem's
But when it comes to things like that, everybody knows by heart, it's okay.
Okay, so it says to say like the Shema and the Ve'ahavta without a text in front of me is okay?
Yeah, you don't need a text.
Okay.
You don't need a text, yeah. It's funny, that I'll tell you something really funny, something ironic. When I was with the Rabbi in Israel, I used to watch him a lot, to see like what he's doing, like what's going on with him, like there's a lot to learn by watching, whatever. So, I was very curious, very right. So very inquisitive. So sometimes, I would see something very peculiar, which was that, when he was saying the Kriyat Shema, he would have his finger in the Siddur, and follow the words in the Siddur, So I was like saying to myself, wow, this is really ironic. Like, what's the irony of it, Here's a man, who knows the whole Torah by heart. You know what I mean? In the Kriyat Shema, he's putting his finger on it. What's going on with that? You know what I mean? Like, what's that about? This is a man that when he was 30 years old, he knew the whole Talmud by heart. And he needs to put his finger on the Kriyat Shema? Even I don't need that. So what's going on? So, but then you figure it out, like whatever. You know what it is? We already discussed this, right? That there are places in the Kriyat Shema where you're supposed to stop, and this and that, right? So you probably want to pronounce everything properly, and stop in the right places to make those gaps. And the good Siddur teaches you how to do that, So therefore, he was probably doing that in order to be very medakdek, to be very precise. You know what I mean? And it's a good advice and not obligation, obviously. There's no obligation to do that. But, it just shows you such a big man like that is so worried about something so little. It's incredible. I was very impressed with that. That was very impressive. Okay. So, yeah. Let's see the Beit Yosef, the tour. We're done with the tour. So says the Beit Yosef that you have to hear it in your ears, as we said, right? The Chatchila, you should hear what you're saying. So it says, Per Kaya Koret, it's over there in the Gemara, Tetvav Amud Aleph, Tanan. The Mishnah says, HaKoret Shema velo yishmi'a leozno. If he reads the Shema, but he didn't hear it, right? B'diavad, he didn't hear what he said. Right? Yatsa, so according to first opinion, he fulfills obligation, B'diavad. Rabbi Yosef Omer, says Rabbi Yosef, Lo Yatsa. He holds that you didn't fulfill your obligation. The Ifsika b'Gemara, so the Gemara Paskins there, we go according to lenient opinion, right? Which is the first opinion. Upek Mishemeto, and this pek, Kaf Amud Bet, Amatnitin on the Mishnah, the Baal Keri Me'arher Beribo. Oh, so there you go, right? Something interesting. I have to explain to you guys a little bit this whole story, right? You get the context here. that there's in those days, right? They were very particular to be in purity. Right? Today we're not so particular about these things, but in those days they were very particular. So what does that mean? That if somebody was Baal Keri, which means that he had like a wet dream, seminal mission, whatever, right? This guy. Well, let's say he lived with his wife. Okay, so he had an ejaculation. Excuse my language, right? So what happens is that in those days there was a decree by Ezra that if you did that, you can't say Divrei Torah from your mouth until you go into mikveh. There was a decree like that. It got nullified, by the way, because they weren't able to keep it. So that's why today we're not particular about it. But anyway, right? So it tells you if you're in that situation where you couldn't go to the mikveh, so what do? Instead of saying the Kriyat Shema out loud, you read it by heart. Just look at it. Because here you have no choice, you know what I mean? That's the first opinion. Amar Ravina Zotomet says this rabbi, he deduces from there. He says, oh, there you go, right? That thinking about it is like saying it. It's the same thing. That's the first opinion, right? This rabbi says, no, thinking and saying is two different things. Don't try to equate them. Katab Shema Rosh, says the Rosh over there, that the Rach pasak halacha ki Rabbi Chazda. He passed like Rabbi Chazda, right? So what does that mean? That it's not the same thing. Then you'll say so therefore he doesn't fulfill his obligation when it comes to Kriyat Shema by thinking about it, even though he had a seminal mission. Doesn't make any difference. So therefore, the only way to do it is to actually pronounce it. Even though he doesn't have to actually hear it, as we said. The pasuk Rav Chazda, like the pasuk is like this himself. Kufeh, perek bet, the second perek. V'chen katav Rabbeinu Yonah. That's what it says also Rabbeinu Yonah. Gamken. Okay, good. That's Gimel. So let's see the Shulchan Aruch Gimel. So it says Shulchan Aruch, you have to hear what you're saying, but whatever you're saying. If he didn't hear it, but diavad, he fulfills obligation. But at least he has to pronounce it, right? He has to move his lips. Read my lips. You have to make sure you move those lips. Okay, that's Gimel. Let's go to Daled. So it goes on in the Bet Yosef. Katuv be'Orchot Chaim. It says in the Orchot Chaim, Lefi Dat Yerushalmi, according to Yerushalmi, Nireh she'im mechamat choli o ones. So it says, it seems that if a person was sick or he had some kind of a condition, whatever, right? Some kind of other conditions. In other words, it's preventing him from doing things properly. He can't. Right? So he says that in a case like that where he has no choice, says the Orchot Chaim, then if he did it by heart, he fulfills obligation because there's no other way for him to do. He can't talk, he can't pronounce it. Whatever it may be, right? That's what he says. Interesting. So let's see the Shulchan Aruch on that. Dalet. Says Shulchan Aruch, im mechamat chol honest, right? Acher. If a person was sick or some kind of other issue, he couldn't read it out loud, right? Whatever. Right? If he read it by heart, yatsa, he fulfills obligation. There you go, right? So there are cases where it does work to do it by heart, but only in cases where there's no other choice. So says the Ramah regarding that, ואף לכתחילה יעשה כן אם הוא במקום שאינו נקי לגמרי. Oh, look what it says, right, the Rama. And it says, if you're in a place where it's not clean there, right, you're in a dirty place. So, the rule is in the dirty place, you're not allowed to say words of Torah. Right? It smells bad, whatever, right? You're not allowed to speak deep words of Torah there. So he says, in a place like that, even lechatchila you can do it. What does that mean? Just think about it in your heart. Because you can't say it there. So he says, but it can't be a place which is like totally disgusting, like whatever. Right? So he says, if it's really, like stinky, smelly, like filthy, even to think about it, you can't do there. That's what he says. So by the way, this has a practical application, this halakha. You know what the trick is? Let's say, you're one of those like, very Torah-oriented people, right? So you want to hear Divrei Torah all the time, wherever you are, in your car, right? Even in the shower, you want to hear it, right? So now, let's say you want to hear Divrei Torah in the shower. Are you allowed to do that? That's the question, right?
No, because you're uncovered, yeah.
Well, you would think, right? That's going to stop you, but
Unless
the
you're
truth
taking a
is,
shower with your bathing suit on.
oh, your birthday suit. So,
There's a drain.
I'm sorry?
There's a drain and you cannot pray where there's a drain.
Drain.
Yeah.
What about the drain?
Well, when you're taking a shower, it goes into a drain. It goes into the sewage. So
Okay, and therefore what?
you're not supposed to pray.
Okay, I think you guys, you're a little bit maybe right. You need to learn a little bit more about this issue. So here's the story, right? That the truth is, it depends on like what kind of bathhouse you're in, right? What kind of bath. So if you're in a public bathhouse, there it's more of a problem. You know why? Because it's usually like they're very dirty there. There's like 1,000 people coming in there a day, whatever. Like one of those mikvahs, some mikvahs, Baruch Hashem, are very clean, but some mikvahs are not so clean. I hope you haven't been to the dirty ones because it's not a nice experience to go there. What can I tell you? They're not all like the Georgian shul, nice and clean, they're not all like that. So anyway, right? If it's a public bathhouse, which is assumed to be dirty, so there a person cannot even think about words of Torah. As we said, right? This is what the Ramah is saying here. But here's the thing, right? That when you're in the home, you have like a private shower, so usually that shower is very clean. You know what I mean? You ladies know what I'm talking about, right?
I know what you're talking about, but I thought the problem was if you had your genitals uncovered, you cannot.
Oh, good, very good. Yeah, I thought that too, but well, I'll explain to you how that works. Right, first of all, right, the issue of that it's clean, right? Number one, it's a clean place, and then we're also assuming, right, that there's no toilet there. It's just a shower room without a toilet. Or the other case could be possibly the toilet is closed. You know what I mean? So it's closed. That may work also, by the way. That may do the job, especially if your bathroom is really, really clean. So it doesn't smell there. There's no smell. Because if you got a smell there, you can't do it. But here's the thing, right? So the rule is like this. So if you have like a shower or a bath, okay, and it's a very clean room there, even though you're naked there, right? You're allowed to hear words of Torah. So what does that mean? You can't say them, but you can hear them. It's not the same thing. That's exactly what we're saying over here.
We can't say the Shema there.
Cannot say the Shema there, but you can listen to words of Torah. As long as it's a clean room.
Even the name of Hashem?
Words of Torah, the whole thing, the whole gamut.
Are we assuming that there's a shower curtain between you and the source of the words?
We don't care about that because the words are, just they're flying in the air.
So even with your genitals exposed, it's okay to do this.
Exactly, because you're just hearing it. You're not saying it. It's not the same thing. That's exactly what the Ramah is saying over here. Saying it and hearing it is two different things. So therefore, the rule is, right, if you are in a situation like that where the shower is really clean and the toilet is like, not there or it's closed, very clean environment. So then you can put on your MP3 there and listen to your phone and listen to Divrei Torah in the shower. Who writes this? The Rabbi Moshe Maran. He has a tshuva on this. So I'm not just making it up from the sky. So yeah, he talks about that. So that's what we're saying over here. But the problem is the public ones are usually dirty, so there it's a different story, you know what I mean? Except the Georgian shul, right? Over there, that lady keeps it clean there. She's a nice balabuster, lady there. She does a good job, so it's like a private one over there. You don't see nothing. But the truth is that the mikveh room itself, though, it's considered to be public because a lot of people go into that one, It's like, whatever. So you're not allowed to say like the blessing there, That's why the blessing you have to say outside. You can't say the blessing in that room. The Ashkenazim, they do it, they say it, but we don't say it. Sfardim. It also depends if the mikveh is hot or cold. That also comes into the picture. But anyway, right, so I'm not going to get into that now. That's not the issue.
Also, are you allowed, is it
I'm sorry?
better if it's hot or better if it's cold?
It's better if it's cold because the heat makes like smell.
Okay.
It makes it smelly. So therefore, right. But again, right, there are, mikvahs which are really, really clean. And even though they're hot, they're like really cool, but the rabbi doesn't allow that. He doesn't allow in a public mikveh, to where there's hot water there. He doesn't allow it to say the blessing there. So therefore, the rule is by us, we say the blessing. The Sfardim I'm talking about, right? The rule is that we say the blessing in the fitting room, and then we dunk into the other room. That's how we do it, right? When you guys get married, that's what you'll do. So yeah, because the convert, right, that's something else, right? The convert says it after, because before he can't say he's not Jewish yet. You know what I mean? So he's got to do afterwards. But when it comes to a married woman, she's got to say the blessing before, because that's the way it is. The blessing is supposed to come before the mitzvah, not after. Okay, very good. So I guess we can go on. Let's see what else we got left here. Yeah, there's one more. There's hay. We got hay here. So to finish the chapter. So it says over here in the Bet Yosef, Katava Kolbo, says the Kolbo, the Midrash, right? It brings in the Midrash. Where is this Shira Shirim, right? Shira Shirim Rabbah. So it says there, Shetzarich Shaliach Tzibur Leashmiya Kolo B'Shema Yisrael. Oh, right? So he says, the Chazan, when he says Shema Yisrael, he has to say it out loud. That people should hear him. What's the reason why? Because they should hear it, people, and do it together. Everybody goes together. Shema. So they accept the whole yoke of heaven, right? In everybody together in unison. Nice, beautiful, right? The mitzvah there. Wow, so he says like this, that if the individual already said it, right? Let's say he was a little bit faster, whatever, or he came earlier, so he said it already, and now the Chazan gets up to it. So he says the individual also has to repeat it himself now with the tzibur. Why? Because if he doesn't repeat it, even though he already said it, it seems like, he's trying to avoid it. The people are going to be suspicious with him. What's with this guy, Is he like a Christian maybe? He believes in the Trinity? That's why he's not saying God is one? What's going on with this guy, right? They're going to suspect him, that he's a heretic. So therefore, this is the reason why when the tzibur says, when the community says Shema, even though you already said it, you have to say it again with them. So you shouldn't look like what do you call it? One of these people who are trying to get away from it, to run off, and something like that. Yeah. So he goes on. V'chen im lo amro adain. He says also the same thing applies if he didn't say it yet, obviously, right? If he didn't say it yet, let's say they're ahead of him, right? The Chazan is ahead of him. He's trying to catch up. So you'll get there like in a minute or so, right? But meanwhile, since now the community is saying the Shema, you should take together with them, even though he's not up to it yet, because the same reason, right? Because we don't want him to sound like a heretic or something, somebody who's a denier. So this is the reason why we want him to do it. So this is an obligation, it's pretty much to do it this way.
Do we have to cover our eyes with our hand, or can you close your eyes?
You know what it is? Since the custom is to cover, if you don't do it, you're going to look like, like you're not doing it. That's the thing, You know what I mean? It looks suspicious also. So therefore, the proper thing is to cover. I'm sorry?
Same with if you're by yourself?
Yeah, the custom is to do it, so you should do it. It's a custom. There's a reason for it, because sometimes, a person like winks his eyes, but you can, it's not so good like covering your eyes. It makes it, even more complete, whatever, So therefore, the proper thing to do is to do like the custom, to pass your hand over your eyes, like everybody else does. Some people, by the way, in the morning, the men, some people do it with the talit. They put the talit like this. That's good. That's good. That sounds good. Looks very fancy. Looks very, very impressive. Nice. No problem. Okay, so yeah. Let's see the Shulchan Aruch on this, and we're done with this chapter. I think we just did that. Oh, did we do it? Yeah, we did it, right? Okay, I know we didn't do it. So it says like this. So it says, right, same thing. The Shliach Tzibur has to say it out loud, the first verse. Shema Recital, in order the people should hear, they should do it together, right, everybody? Accept the yoke of heaven. Together in unison. All right, beautiful. That's the end of the chapter. We still have like 5 minutes, so we can go on a little bit. Okay, good. Let's see what's with this next chapter. It's a little bit bigger. Let's see what we can do. Yeah, so it says in the tour, ben mehalech ben omed, right? Ben yoshev. So right? The rule is you can read the Shema whether you're walking in the street, or just standing or sitting. That's right. It says, that's what it says. You can read it while you're walking. So the Torah wasn't particular to do it in a certain way, standing, sitting, this, that. Also, you can read it while you're walking. Well, also while you're in the car, right? Or whatever, right? Yeah. I guess you could also do it when you're driving, if you can concentrate. I've done it a couple of times myself. No problem. Okay. I remember I was in Israel, like last year, and I was driving to the north, I had a meeting there. So it was like a very far away place, like boondocks, So it was a long drive. So I couldn't get to the destination by the night. So I prayed mincha, when I was driving, like in the car. I was like, I did Shema also. I said the Shema, so I had no choice, so I couldn't stop. There was no place to stop there. Whatever, so I just had to go on and do it.
Kavod Harav, in regards to Mincha, is there like a bridge version of Shemoneh Esrei that you can recite, and then when you get to the final destination, you're able to recite the actual Shemoneh Esrei, or how does it work?
Yeah, good question. Okay, very good. So, the truth is that we don't have an abridged Shemoneh Esrei. We don't have that. But there is like a short Amidah, which is like only like 7 blessings.
Okay.
But nobody does this today,
I think I know which one you're talking about.
It's brought down in the Talmud, the language of this prayer. It's brought down. Nobody does it today because it's only made for like emergency situations.
So if you're driving a car, can you do that in that case?
Well, only if you can't concentrate, otherwise. Then yes, you could, yes.
Okay. Or you're in a flight or something, sometimes.
So the truth is, that there's all kinds of different rules about that. We're going to get to that, by the way, pretty soon. We're going to talk about that issue, about doing Amidah, doing prayers, what to do, where what, and all these things. We're going to get into it soon. Probably sometime in the summer, we'll cover that. Whatever, right? Whatever, or somewhere around there.
Is it ever okay to do the Amidah when you're not standing though?
Yes, if you're in the car, you can't stand.
So how could you do it in the car if you can't stand?
Because there's a rule like this in halakha, right? Anus rachamana patre. You know what that means? That when you're not able, Hashem forgives you, right? So not able. You know what I mean? Same thing when you're on a plane, right? Even though some people do stand, by the way.
I still stand. I've done it on a train before.
Right. Some people do stand on the plane, but the truth is the rabbis don't like this custom.
Why is that?
Because they say you're bothering the flight attendants, and just leave them alone, let them do their job, and stop blocking the aisle. So that's why the rabbis don't like it. So what they suggest, the rabbis, is that you should just sit in your chair and pray like that. This is the proper thing to do on the plane. That's what the big rabbis do, the big guys. They don't want to bother the flight attendants. But, the rude people, what they do is, they go, they make a whole ruckus, and make the flight attendants angry, But the truth is that today the flight attendants are used to it, especially if you're going on a Jewish airline, whatever, Jewish-oriented airline. But the rabbis, don't like this business, honestly. They say, just you're bothering people when you do that on the plane. There's just no room for it. So, yeah, go figure. So they told me, that the Rabbi Maran, when he flew to the States, he just sat in his seat and he did all the prayers in his seat. Right? That's it. Also, Rav Shlomo Zalman Auerbach, they say, when he traveled somewhere in the plane, he sat there, he was a very gentlemanly person. He don't want to bother anybody, So he was very gentleman, So he sat there, did his job, didn't want to be rude, right? Whatever. Okay, so yeah, that's the story with that. So, right. So it says chutz miparkadon, right? But there's one thing you can't do, right? You can't say Shema if you're lying on your back. Like your face up and lying on your back. That you cannot do.
Why not?
I'm sorry?
Why?
It's considered to be disrespectful. So therefore, we're going to see, right? The rule is that if you're in bed, what you have to do is like get on your side and do it like that.
Okay, so yesterday I was on my back because I was getting ready to go under.
Right, I understand. But in general, like if a person can be on his side, that's the way you should do it.
Okay, so retrospectively, should I have not said Shema at all? Because I felt like I needed to because I was.
No, I think your situation was, probably very, there was no. You weren't saying it because of an obligation. You're just saying it because, as a prayer.
What?
You know what I mean?
It could have been my bedtime Shema at that point.
Yeah, it was a little bit, so in other words, it doesn't really apply so much in that case.
Okay.
But it does apply, when you're going to sleep, let's say, right? And you're in bed. Now you're too lazy to get up, so just get on your side and you can say it like that. We're going to talk about that, President Hashem, next week.
Right side, no? Not left side, correct? Or
I don't think it makes any difference.
Okay.
That's only regarding eating, right? Eating, it's better to go on your left and not on your right, right?
Before you go to bed, right? That's how the righteous people sleep. No, they sleep first on their left.
So the Rambam says like this, by the way, regarding that, what you're asking. The Rambam says the best way to sleep is do like half the night on your right side and half the night on your left side, because that balances out the body.
Okay.
If you want to know.
No, I've read something like this.
Yeah.
But I thought it was first on the left and then on the right.
You know what the Ashkenazim, right? You know what they call the Rambam?
What?
They call him the doctor, because he was a doctor, right?
Yes,
So the doctor said that's the way you got to do it. That's what I'm telling you.
Okay.
Doctor's orders.
Yes, I read this in the Shulchan Aruch, but it wasn't.
Okay, God bless you. We'll talk about it tomorrow, and we'll continue with next time, next week.
Thank you.
I'm not mistaken, right? Tonight is Thursday, right? I shouldn't make another mistake.
No, it's okay.
Okay, so I'll say Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom.
I'm not going to say Chag Sameach because that's next week. Sorry. Okay, so my daughter asked me today, she says, when is the Shavuot? I said, next week, don't worry, we got time. Not this week. Okay, so anyway, Chazak Baruch, be healthy, happy, wealth, be blessed with wealth, health, and happiness, and be holy, and Hashem should bless you.
Amen.
See you on Sunday, B'ezrat Hashem.
Amen.
Thank you, Kabbalah.
All the best.
Okay.
Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom.